Hello and welcome home to part 2. Is the term welcome home getting old yet? Maybe that's getting a little bit old. I do want to give a shout out to all my Aussie friends. I know that you have just gotten your kits or they're on the way to you from the shops that you've ordered them through. And you haven't missed anything. Part 1, if you haven't gotten to start laying out your fabrics and sewing yet, is listed in the Facebook feed, and it's on the Free Spirit website under the Be Inspired tab, so you have not missed a thing. But of course, I will try to babysit those posts and go back in case you're just now joining part 1 and you want to ask more questions under that. So I'll have a look at that later today in case I can be of further help. So month 2 is really pretty straightforward because we are working on log cabin-y style courthouse really steps. I'll get into the difference between those two in a little bit. But I want to go through the fabrics that we are using this month. We are using the Little Amsterdam fabric in this pretty golden color. We're using a couple of the Adelaide prints. We're using London, which is so fun for fussy cutting, and that's exactly what we're doing this month. We're using one of the pretty tonal Chicago prints, and I believe that's the dessert colorway. We are also using Adelaide again in this deeper green, turquoise, another Little Amsterdam, and a third Adelaide. Can you tell what my favorite fabric is in this collection? Now, I have pieces of tape on this one and on this one that says +3. That means that after we've cut all of our strips, and that's all we're doing with these fabrics today, with the exception of the center square, and I'll point out where we're working on the quilt, classic siren in the background every time. So we're just using London for this fun little fussy cut in the center. And the patchwork blocks that we're working on sit at the very outer corners of the whole entire quilt. So top and bottom, left and right, those 4 blocks is what we're working on. But anyway, when you cut all your strips, they're all 2.5 inches wide and different lengths. So just pay really close attention to all of the fabrics that are organized by their color letter. They've kind of assigned a letter like fabric I, fabric L, fabric M, etc. Pay attention to which fabric you're cutting which lengths from. These 2 in particular will have some strips cut from them that you're actually not going to use yet. You're going to save them for next month. It says so in the instructions. I just thought I'd give you a heads up about that. So after you do all your strips, and in fact I do want to show you, there's some cutting diagrams here to show you specifically how to cut to save fabric, because you can kind of pair 2 shorter lengths together on one continuous cut. Do your long cuts first and then your sub cutting. So it makes it really simple. Not every single fabric is illustrated, but there are enough illustrations to kind of guide you through saving fabric and having enough. So the only difference I will show you in this diagram, this very general diagram of assembling this courthouse step. The typical log cabin starts in the center, and then you add on one position, and then you continue around kind of as a clock, and then you go add here, and then here, and then here, and then you go again, continuing to match your new strip to whatever shape the pieced center is. The difference with courthouse steps is you'll add top and bottom, and then after you've added top and bottom, you add opposite, the other 2 sides. So every time you added one piece, you add the opposite side, and it continues that way. So you're really, Callan, who's filming today, is too embarrassed for me to tell you, but she was like, oh, like a courthouse, it's fair and balanced. Like, how good is that? Has to be balanced. So, so I want to go over the 4 blocks. They are not exactly the same. 2 are made one way, and then the other 2 are made the other way, okay? So, and the reason for that is they kind of do a mirror image. You can see that here where the left side of this one has these warm kind of yellow tones, and the outer side has the kind of plummy and red, but then on this side there's a mirror image. So this one, the top left is the same as the bottom right, and the top right is the same as the bottom left. So that means you're gonna be making 2 of each kind. And I've got those 2 different colorways laid out for you here. And you can see that the first colorway that I have here matches this. Now in the booklet, I don't want you to get confused, because in the booklet, these are turned in the way that is oriented to how they're gonna sit in the quilt, okay? And that's on opposite corners. But really, look, I've got a little visual guide. I cut one out right here. Really, they're exactly the same, because all you have to do is turn this way, and that's exactly the same. They've just shown it to you in its final orientation. And the same is true for colorway 2, where this is the orientation on one position of the quilt, but then the same exact sewing and layout just flips around. Okay, so I didn't want you to think that there are 4 different styles, but those are the 2 that I have laid out here. So again, it's just gonna be starting at the center and adding these little pieces that match the center in width, pressing, I like to press my seam allowances out, and then adding these, and then you continue to just kind of sew in pairs across the center. So that's colorway 1, that's colorway 2. Just take your time. I mean, because this is actually really simple sewing this month, which is a nice kind of little break. So just really focus and take your time on making sure. I mean, I was laying these out for you today, and I designed the quilt, and I had to keep like looking and going really slow to make sure. So I obviously have reserved pieces to make the other duplicate of each one of these layouts. And then these are my reserves for next month out of Little Amsterdam and Adelaide. So very simple and straightforward patchwork this month. I do want to show you just a little, it's a very simple but hopefully helpful fussy cutting trick for the center square. So the center square, I believe, is 4.5 inches. On that London, yeah, it's a 4.5 inch square. And I'm not rich in various templates and grids. I should be. I have a fabric shop. You would think that I would have every grid imaginable, but I don't. So the way that I do a little cheat is I just take one of my smaller grids and I put some painting tape right at the 4.5 inch line on both sides. And that allows me to look through the grid here. And really what I'm trying to do is I'm really just trying to sort of have an equal amount of space of that kind of coral background on each side of the circle. And that looks pretty good. So if you're bold, you can just, you know, get the rest of the fabric out from behind there and you could go ahead and make a cut, but I don't think it hurts to make a line. Okay, and I've stopped my line at those 4.5 inch marks. And then I'm gonna turn this around the other way, match the tape up to my drawn line. And we did something really similar to this for cutting last month, some of the bigger squares. But I did that with a see-through piece of Swedish tracing paper, but I thought that this would be a nice little trick for you to get that centered. So then you can go back and cut that with a rotary or with scissors, and then you have your pretty flowers. The only other thing I wanna say in regards to those centers is that the other thing about the orientation that they give you of these blocks is that the pattern writers were really specific about the direction of that flower, so that wherever it occurs in the quilt, in the top or bottom corners, that the flower is always kind of spacing up in the kind of direction of the right direction of the fabric, whether you're looking at the bottom one or the top one. I don't really think that matters. I'm not too worried about that. In fact, I'm not even sure if I think they might be looking at you upside down or sideways in relationship to the direction of the fabric. But for instance, you know, this flower to me doesn't really have a wrong side or a right side. Most of them don't. Maybe the rose you would want sitting up one way so that it's standing up. But if you would like to let your flowers chill, you can let your flowers chill and spin any direction that you want. So I hope that helps. Happy sewing. I hope you're having fun out there doing this quilt. I certainly love following along and seeing all the fantastic tips and all of the questions I've already gotten about month 5, which is fantastic, but we're always here to help. So just leave a comment in Facebook if that's where you're viewing this, or send us a note if you need anything else, and I will see you for part 3 next month.